It all started when I received a call from my sister Jane. She sounded frantic and begged me to come to this building in the heart of New Jersey. She said she needed my help and that it was urgent. We weren't always on good terms with each other, but I couldn't refuse her. She was my sister, after all. So I drove to the building, my heart racing with worry and fear. As I entered the building, I noticed that there were others there as well. Strangers who were also summoned by their family members. We all exchanged confused looks, wondering what was going on. But before we could even ask, the doors slammed shut and we were trapped inside. We tried to call for help, but there was no signal on our phones. And when we tried to open the doors, they wouldn't budge. It was like the building was designed to keep us in. Panic started to set in as we realized that we were locked in this building with no means of escape. As we searched for a way out, we soon realized that we were not alone. Strange noises echoed through the corridors, and we could feel someone watching us. The atmosphere was tense and eerie, putting us all on edge. But things took a turn for the worse when one of the strangers suddenly disappeared. We searched for her frantically, calling out for her, but he was nowhere to be found. And then we heard a blood-curdling scream coming from one of the rooms. We all rushed towards the sound, and what we saw made us all freeze in terror. She was lying on the floor, her throat slit open. It was like something out of a horror movie. We all started to panic, trying to figure out who could have done this. But before we could even process what was happening, another person went missing, and then another. It became clear that there was a serial killer among us. We were all being hunted down, one by one, and I couldn't help but wonder, why were we all summoned to this building? Was it all a sick game orchestrated by the killer? As the night went on, we continued to be terrorized by the killer. We found ourselves in gruesome traps and deadly situations, and one by one, my fellow strangers were killed off. And then, I was the only one left. At that point, I was ready to die, but I couldn't stop trying to survive. I was frantically searching the house, looking to find something to help me open the door, or to protect myself. In one of the kitchen drawers, I found a key. It was taped to a knife. I didn't think twice. I grabbed the knife and detached the key. I rushed to the main door, and shockingly, the key opened it. The moment when I exited the building, the police finally arrived and saw the carnage. They didn't believe my story. They found me covered in blood, surrounded by the bodies of the other strangers. I was arrested then, and without any evidence to prove my innocence, I was charged with the murder of all those people. But I know the truth. I know that there was something sinister at play in that building. It was all planned. The killer called me into the building, using my sister's voice, killed everyone, and tricked me into taking all the guilt. I will never be able to forget the horrors that I witnessed that night, the night that changed my life forever. It was just a regular Friday afternoon at the university, with students buzzing around campus, excited for the weekend ahead. I walked with my friends, laughing and chatting about our plans for the night. Little did we know that this would be a Friday we would never forget. As we made our way to the cafeteria, an alarming announcement echoed through the halls. The university was going into lockdown. Panic spread like wildfire as students and faculty hurriedly made their way to find shelter. Some huddled in classrooms, while others sought refuge in nearby buildings. I found myself in the library, locked inside with dozens of other students. The atmosphere was tense and filled with fear. No one knew what was happening or why we were being forced to stay in one place. All we could do was wait for the all-clear signal. As the doors were locked and the windows covered, a foreboding sense of dread settled over the campus. The library, once a place of peace and quiet, now felt like a prison. My heart raced as I tried to make sense of the situation. What could possibly be happening? Hours passed, and the lockdown was finally lifted. We were told to return to our dorms and to stay indoors for the rest of the night. As my friends and I made our way back to our dorm, we noticed something strange. The usually bustling campus was now eerily quiet. There were no students walking around, no sounds of laughter or chatter. It was as if the campus had been deserted. It wasn't until the next morning that the true horror of what happened during those stolen moments came to light. Bodies were found hidden in the darkest corners of the university. Students and faculty were missing, and a chilling message was scrawled on the walls of the library where I had sought shelter. "You're all going to die." The incident was swept under the rug, with the university officials claiming it was a dangerous intruder who had caused the chaos. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just a mere intruder. There was something more sinister in that university. Whispers and rumors started to spread among the students. Some claimed to have seen a shadowy figure lurking in the halls during the lockdown. Others believed that the university was haunted, but no one knew the truth. Many students transferred to other universities, unable to shake off the fear and unease that lingered in the air. But for those of us who stayed, a sense of maturity and understanding settled over us. We had survived something truly terrifying, and that changed us. Years went by, and the incident was almost forgotten. But every now and then, when a strange occurrence would happen on campus, it reminded us of that dark day. I never returned to the library where I had been locked in during the lockdown. The memory of that day still sends shivers down my spine. But sometimes, when I walk past it, I can't help but feel a sense of unease and the lingering presence of something malevolent. To this day, the university remains a place of whispers and ghost stories. And for those of us who were there on that fateful day, we know the truth. There is something trapped within the walls of that campus, and it will never stop haunting us. As a nurse at St. Mary's Hospital, I was used to the chaos and unpredictability of the job, but nothing could have prepared me for what was about to happen on that fateful rainy night of October 1st, 1995. It was the time for the annual lockdown drill, and the night shift nurses were accustomed to the eerie stillness of the ward during these drills. We had all been briefed on the protocol and knew exactly what to do in case of a real emergency. Little did we know that this drill would turn into a real nightmare. As the alarm went off, signaling the start of the lockdown, I made my rounds, checking on the patients and making sure everything was in order. However, as I walked down the dimly lit hallway, I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off. The air felt heavy, and there was an unusual hush that seemed to engulf the entire hospital. Just as I was about to dismiss it as my imagination, I heard blood-curdling screams coming from the patient's room. Without hesitation, I rushed towards the source of the noise, my heart racing with fear and anticipation. As I entered the room, I was met with chaos and confusion. Patients were running around in a frenzy. some crying, some shouting, and some simply frozen in fear. The other nurses and I quickly assessed the situation and realized that the lockdown was not just a drill. A patient had escaped his room and was causing mayhem. But what was even more disturbing was the fact that the patient seemed to be possessed by some sort of supernatural force. His eyes were bloodshot, and his movements were erratic and inhuman. He was attacking anyone who came near him, and his strength seemed to be superhuman. We were all in shock and disbelief as we tried to contain the situation. But just then, the power went out, plunging the entire hospital into darkness. Panic set in as we realized that we had no way to call for outside help and no explanation for the bizarre behavior of the patient. With trembling hands, I reached for my phone, hoping for a signal, but to my horror, I found that all of our phones were dead. It was then that we realized we were trapped in a true horror story, with no way out. As we tried to calm the patients and keep them safe, we also began to investigate the cause of the patient's sudden outburst. We searched through his medical records and discovered that he was suffering from a rare virus that caused extreme anger and aggression in its victims. We looked for him everywhere in the hospital, and finally, when we entered the operating room, we found him, a lifeless body, drowned in his own blood, holding a surgical knife in his head. He killed himself with the virus in his body before we could find him. From that day on, the annual lockdown drills took on a whole new meaning for me and my fellow nurses. We knew that we were not just preparing for a drill, but for a real-life horror story that could happen at any moment. And we were determined to be ready for it, no matter what.